Riot announced a bunch of layoffs, and I didn't make a video about it because I didn't really know what this article meant, to be honest with you. I was talking about it a bunch on stream, and a lot of it seemed like, apart from the obvious stuff of them cutting back on Legends of Runeterra and Riot Forge, a lot of it seemed to be a little difficult to parse. Like, what, for example, does our strategy will more tightly integrate esports, music, and entertainment with our games exactly mean? Not 100% sure. You could read it as they're trying to double down on focusing on esports, music, and entertainment within these 4 titles. Or you can read it as they don't want to do things that are a little further away from the core gameplay experience. And especially with some of the esports staff being laid off, as we've seen on Twitter, I'm more inclined to think it was the latter rather than the former. But it's really difficult to know when these are phrased like this. It is obviously unfortunate that they've had to make such large layoffs, but I wasn't talking about it because I didn't really know what relevance it would have. But today, we got this article from Cecilia D'Anastasio, who's a fantastic reporter who's writing for Bloomberg at the moment. Always got a finger on the pulse of something interesting. And this was something that hasn't really been discussed within the community so much. I was just looking at how it was received on Reddit. People weren't really talking about it. And even in the comments, people were like, it doesn't seem like a big deal. I think it's actually a really big deal. And I want to kind of discuss this because it kind of explains more about how developers and frankly, everybody in esports is really struggling to monetize the entire product. So the title is Riot Games shuts down effort to build a streaming rival to Twitch. But I think that title is very misleading because frankly, this wasn't really supposed to be a rival to Twitch. And I think that misleads people as if Riot are doing like their own thing where you can sign up for Riot streaming and you go on and you're just Tyler 1 doing your solo queue games and you get subs or something. That wasn't ever their idea. Their idea was to build a platform like LoL Esports was, or is, and have it be available for everybody to watch League of Legends, Valorant, and presumably their other core titles, Teamfight Tactics and Wild Rift, through it. And they've scrapped it. So it was called the Riot Esports Network, nicknamed REN, a web and mobile app where fans could watch and engage with Riot's competitive games and professional players. And it got completely scrapped as a result of these layoffs that affected 11% of Riot staff, which is a really bloody big layoff. And you saw its impact rippling all throughout, different people posting on Twitter that they were affected by it. I saw mostly people in esports because that's the people that I follow, but I'm sure it hit a bunch of different departments as well. So John Needham, the president of esports, who's previously been very vocal about this topic, we'll talk about that later, said, "We were testing some watch platform ideas, but opted to cancel our initiative REN last week." And I'll go through this article where he's talking about it. And the original idea was to have a viewing platform that would allow them to circumvent the bad way in which Twitch sells against its viewership and the limitations that are put on esports products because people are not interested in buying broadcast rights for them. And this is just adding some additional context towards the end here and talking about the fact that REN would have added to the live streaming experience. Players could receive bonuses for watching or purchase in-game items. Again, John Needham talks about this a bit more in an article that they posted just last year. And REN was in an internal testing phase before it was cancelled. So this was, by the way, this has been in the works since about 2016, as far as I can tell. But this specific project seems to have been started, in 2021 here as a result of acquiring Kanga. So this was, I missed this completely, but this was in 2021, kind of at the beginning of when Valorant was launching. They acquired media tech startup Kanga, who really focused on doing digital fandom experiences, which is somewhat similar to what Riot were kind of planning to do. But Kanga is not the first group of people that they were working with. Now, Kanga got the team got distributed all throughout Riot apparently, and presumably were working on the project, or at least some of them were working on the project. But their idea for launching a platform like this actually goes all the way back. There's a report here from Darren Klawinski, who was reporting on this in 2016 in December, when BAMTech, who are the video streaming digital arm of what the MLB were doing, were going to actually pay $300 million to Riot Games throughout 2023 for the streaming rights to League of Legends. Now, this is a little bit complicated here, because you would think that if you know, for example, with this acquisition, you're paying the people that own Kanga in order to acquire their intellectual property, their workers, and to be able to build something similar within your own product. This is something that Riot are paying for. But the original version of this deal was actually BAMTech paying Riot $300 million to have the exclusive rights to stream and monetize League of Legends competitions. So crucially here, BAMTech would have been the company benefiting monetarily in the long term from this monetization deal. Any adverts, any sponsorships, that kind of thing that they were able to sell against it would have been BAMTech that were the beneficiaries, and Riot would have had $300 million to work with. So kind of like not just a licensing deal in the sense that you're giving them broadcast rights. It's not just that, because also BAMTech was going to work on launching a streaming application, which would run on both PCs and smartphones, very similar to what they were talking about with Ren, and was intending to monetize via advertising, sales, and sponsorship deals, right? So this is how something like Twitch makes their money as well. This is how something like, cable channels make their money too. This is what we would refer to as a broadcast rights deal. But they were going to actually build this streaming application as part of the deal and then distribute it to Twitch and YouTube as well. So this wasn't supposed to be an exclusive deal where it only lived on, whatever the hell the app would have been called. But let's say the app was called BAMTech Riot or something. It wouldn't have just lived on there. It would have also been pushed to Twitch and YouTube. They confirmed that the current experience of what they were watching, the Riot leadership said, what you're currently getting for League of Legends, which is, what was it, like a 1080p stream of just the Observer POV and that kind of thing, that would just maintain its current place of being free. But the whole point of these kind of digital media deals is that the streaming applications that you create can offer much more on top of that. So they can offer all sorts of other things in order to entice people to watch there. And we'll go through why that's important later on. But this deal with BAMTech that Riot announced and were thrilled about 7 years ago, it fell to pieces. They called it a game changer for our sport and were trying to get economic stability with it. And it fell to pieces because, in part, Disney had acquired a majority stake in the company. They had completely shifted their focus towards ESPN Plus instead of any BAMTech stuff. So by kind of taking over by Disney acquiring BAMTech, restructuring how that company was going to work and focusing on ESPN Plus, the deal fell to pieces, this $350 million deal. And instead, they ended up just being on ESPN Plus for a while. Now, I don't follow League of Legends, so I have no idea what it actually looked like when League of Legends was on ESPN Plus, whether they had any incentives to actually use the platform at all. But it was broadcast on there at some point. Now, this isn't something that I can give you any details on, frankly. But if you pull back up to the present day, so this was in 2018 when they were on ESPN Plus. So it took them, it took 18 months just for the deal to fall apart, and then it took another year for them to be broadcast on ESPN Plus. You pull things back to 2021, that's when they acquired Kanga to try and do it all again. And then in 2023, this is John Needham, the president of esports at Riot Games, explaining why this is important. And this is really the crux, because unless you know that it's important, it's like, so what? They tried to make some kind of portal for you to watch games through. Who gives a shit? But in the landscape of esports at the moment, it does end up being quite important. And yes, chat, you're right. This is John Riot. John Esports Riot. So here's some things that he's talked about. Now, to set the stage, the way that most traditional sports make money is that they sell broadcast rights to broadcasting companies. They don't do all of the broadcast in-house, as is the trend with esports. And even if you did the broadcast in-house, they still sell the rights to, Fox, or sell the rights to Sky if you're in the UK, or BT Sports, or, whatever the hell it is. But if companies are not willing to pay for broadcast rights, which they're not in esports particularly, or if the money that they're giving you is lower than you think it's worth, which is also the case from what I've heard in esports. It's not that nobody will pay for the rights, but the money that they're offering is way lower than the viewership would suggest if instead it was traditional sports. If you were selling, I mean, this is a silly example because it doesn't exactly make sense, but if you were selling something very traditional sports pilled, I don't know, a tennis tournament, for example, and it had the same viewership as Valorant or League of Legends, or both combined if you wanted to sell a joint deal, then the money for the traditional sports market is much larger than what people are willing to offer for the esports market. So I've been told by people who work in this department. So if instead you're looking to monetize in other ways, what other ways do you actually have routes to make money? And that's what John Needham wanted to lay out here. So one of the things that he's dispelling is that Riot generally doesn't want to use it as a way to acquire new game players. They generally want esports to be profitable, not to just be a loss leader for a marketing point of view, which is something I see fans get wrong all the time. They are actually trying to make the esports in a bubble profitable. Even then, on top of that, you have esports value as a marketing tool and esports potential retention of whales and that kind of thing. But Riot actually wants their esports, the self-contained pocket of their esports division, to be profitable or at least break even. So one of the things that they wanted to do was, let's have a look. Where is it? Right. So they're talking here about their use with sponsors. Here it is. So this is them talking about one big hole in the esports business model is broadcasting licensing revenues. So instead, they are looking towards being able to directly connect with their viewers. Riot Games has a watch platform at lolesports.com that uses an embedded Twitch or YouTube video player. They give you rewards here, event passes, drops, that kind of thing, right? And we are now developing our watch platform to go even further and evolve it into an advanced commerce platform that we can use to sell digital goods and services directly to our fans through our broadcasts. And John Needham's been quoted as saying that this idea of selling digital goods directly to consumer is what he thinks is going to be the breakthrough in terms of monetizing esports properly. Because being able to sell directly to the consumer in a way where you're watching on your phone and you can just click the advert, that's much closer to it's much closer to connecting the viewer to immediately participate in an advert compared to, you see something on TV and you have to go and look it up. And the other part of this too that you have to understand is that if you're watching through the Riot platform, they have way better demographic data on you. So they know what to market towards you. They know what you're more likely to buy. They can tell the sponsors that this advert or this sponsorship is being specifically directed towards, English-speaking viewers, French-speaking viewers, directed towards young viewers, directed towards 30-plus-year-old viewers, directed towards male viewers, directed towards female. Do you understand what I mean? They have much more granularity in terms of being able to serve the adverts, and companies will pay much more for that level of granularity because it results in better conversion and actually money coming back from the advertising revenue. So, for example, here, there's some hypotheticals. Imagine a pro player in a competition chooses a champion that you play in League. We send you a prompt through the watch portal to buy a skin you don't own for that champion. Another example, when we see that one of our players watches every T1 match but hasn't purchased the T1 fan pack, we can try to promote the T1 fan pack to them with details on how that revenue will be shared with the team. So generally just trying to push things that they think are going to be more relevant rather than just trying to push everybody Red Bull or just trying to push everybody Heineken 0.0. You know what I mean? It's more tailored advertising. So this has ended up with these layoffs being something that's been cancelled. Now, I kind of want to just go through the Reddit thread here because I feel like there's some really common misconceptions, generally speaking, with how these kind of things work. So here's one, which is if a large portion of your viewers from VCT come from Twitch co-streams, then it doesn't make sense to move the main broadcast off Twitch. The cost of upkeep would have even less return if most of your viewers are going to be on Twitch anyway, unless you dish out crazy contracts to get all the pros and big streamers on Twitch. Now, there's definitely some truth to that, right? If a lot of your viewers are going to stay on Twitch because they enjoy, well, first of all, being on Twitch, and secondary, the co-streamers that they can watch, then you're not going to get 100% of your viewer base just ported over to whatever this new platform is, this Ren platform. But you can entice them to use the Ren platform by using a range of other things. Like, for example, you can give them individual point of views. Like, you can watch Sentinels play only from the perspective of tens. Dude, people would definitely pay for that stuff. And people did, actually, when it was used in Overwatch League, although I don't know the amount of people that paid for that. But I think in Valorant, specifically with the amount of fan culture, that would have been an absolute moneymaker. They could also provide stuff like live stats. They could also provide stuff like exclusive interviews, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, exclusive, stuff with down that kind of avenue. They could also have stuff like better quality broadcast, the ability to wind back like YouTube does. There are other things that would entice some portion of the viewer base away from Twitch, or also alongside Twitch, because there has never been an indication from the way that Riot have done any of these deals or tried to do any of these deals of it being exclusive to that platform. It's not like the MLG TV thing that nearly killed Call of Duty years ago, or even Overwatch League when they moved to YouTube. It's not supposed to be exclusive. The way that Riot was always framing this idea was that they would just add additional features, a bit like F1 TV, in their specific client. And so from that point of view, it is a bit of speculation how it would have ever interacted with co-streaming, but I think the most likely thing that would have occurred is that you would have been allowed to continue co-streaming on Twitch, but the actual broadcast itself, people like me, when I'm doing the cast, would have told you, hey, if you want to check out this POV, go and check out the Riot Esports Network. You can watch all of your players' POV for the cheap cost of $15 or whatever the hell it would have been. Like we had to do when we were pushing the Twitch All Access Pass. And I think that Riot would be very happy had people just watched Tarek, other co-streamers, and had a second monitor up or a second tab up where they were watching some other additional piece of content. If the additional piece of content was that you got to see something from 10's POV, or if the additional content was extra stats, or the additional content was whatever, I think there's another portion of the viewer base who wouldn't entirely go to that, but would have used the co-streamer and the other thing at the same time. A little bit how in the Africa tournament, people were still watching their watching even though they had to use like the Opera browser or something to get a picture-in-picture version of Finesse, watching watching, who the hell was even in that tournament? I can't remember. Cloud9? Somebody else. I can't remember who the hell was playing. So even in that scenario where somebody just has it passively up on the other screen watching it occasionally, Riot would still be generating adverts for them, more tailored adverts that would make them a lot more money than anything that they're getting on YouTube or Twitch. They would still be gathering data, demographics data, that would be really useful to sell sponsorships against, and they would potentially be selling digital goods as well. It's less likely when you're watching it as not your primary way of ingesting the content, but it's still going to be having some value to them. Now, this one references the MLG disaster with Call of Duty esports, but again, while that was really bad for MLG, that was an exclusive deal, and this was not. And that makes all the difference. Now, it does mean that it's not as attractive in terms of like getting all of your viewership from the same area. They would still be dealing with, like I said, some viewers on Twitch and YouTube that weren't using their portal, but it wouldn't have killed the game. It wouldn't. I just don't see any world in which it would have destroyed viewership. It's only an additional way in which to watch with additional features on the top. I completely reject this idea that it would have in some way killed Valorant or League of Legends had it been used. Now, it might have costed a lot for them to develop. It might have cost them a lot for them to develop this technology, and that might be one of the reasons why they're having to scrap it now. But as Pansy says here in one of the comments, it makes her sad because it could have been an option to monetize esports. Twitch are not willing to pay broadcast rights because they can just get it for free. And if it was like F1 TV with unique content and features, I'm sure plenty of people would have paid for it. And just to take an aside about would this concept have even worked, I think we're already in a world where other streaming platforms are starting to take pieces of the pie away from Twitch. I'm pretty sure that a lot of, well, you can see based on the viewership data that there's a larger and larger number of people watching on YouTube in order to look at, in order to rewind, in order to avoid Twitch chat, for example. Why would you ever want to avoid Twitch chat spamming cum at you constantly? Who knows? And on top of that, the constant comparison is Overwatch League moving over to YouTube and Call of Duty moving over to MLG. Now, even within the context of Overwatch League moving to YouTube, people get that wrong so often. Overwatch League, and I know this is going to boggle your mind, Overwatch League did not suffer in terms of viewership from the move to YouTube. It just didn't. What killed the viewership, there was an enormous dip in 2020. And what caused that dip was the fact that there was an almost cancellation of the 2020 season due to COVID happening. It rebooted online. It was a bad product. It had taken a multi-month break from being live at all, and it absolutely toasted the viewership. The viewership before COVID had cancelled the homestands was good on YouTube. In fact, it was better than it was on Twitch the season before, but you would expect that to be the case because normally the viewership is U-shaped for a long season like that, as in people tune in at the beginning, they tune in at the end for playoffs, and they die off in the middle. And the viewership actually ended up recovering, bouncing back even from the COVID disaster previously to be on track with where it had been on Twitch in the previous year. So people just don't look at the data. They look at the fact that the viewership was bad for like that 1 year. It was tragic that 1 year in 2020. And they just assume that it was YouTube. Even though it doesn't correlate at all to being on YouTube, it specifically correlates with the homestands being cancelled due to COVID. Now, I'm going to bring the chat back because they're spamming Peepo Riot. And we'll see what happens. Yeah, immediately they're spamming cum. So we're gonna take them off the screen again for another second, and we're gonna talk about. So just to sum up, I think that it wouldn't have killed the game. I think that they would have managed to translate some level of viewership over to their platform. And as for why it's useful, you can incentivize people to participate with all of these different types of rewards, but collecting better analytics does actually solve the lack of broadcast rights. So this comment from Zero Crush, I think, again, is a pretty reasonable comment. I do think it's wrong, though. This probably wouldn't have solved the biggest issue of esports everywhere but China, which is the lack of broadcast selling rights. This project isn't really interesting in that regard. I really disagree. I think the project is interesting because it tries to solve the lack of broadcast rights, which is specifically what John Needham was talking about in this article. The fact that if you look at things on Twitch right now, Twitch is awful at being able to sell ads to the right people. It doesn't have the same data that Google does about the viewers, so it doesn't give adverts specifically to the. It doesn't give adverts as specifically to people. It also serves you adverts when you've just watched one, like a minute earlier. It also interrupts your viewing experience completely in order to serve you the advert instead of doing some kind of overlay where you can still watch the content that's happening behind it. Twitch is an appalling platform in terms of how it's integrated adverts into its system. It's intrusive, and it doesn't even serve high CPM adverts because it can't get enough data to be able to serve them properly. So being able to run things on your own platform where you can gather your own analytics and figure out what age somebody is, what games they play, what teams they're a fan of, that is all going to massively, massively boost the money that you can make from sponsorships and advertising revenue, to the point where the idea was that it would have offset the cost of actually getting this technology kicked up to begin with. And was, as John Needham was saying, his bet on, and before them, literally when they originally were making this deal with, with BAMTech, this was Mark Merrill and Waylon Roselle who were in the leadership. This was also their bet on trying to make this happen. Now, this was a slightly different deal, but a similar kind of idea. And I think that makes it an extremely interesting concept, because the idea of being able to properly sell sponsorships allows you to take everything in-house. You don't have to sell the broadcast rights. You can just directly make the money in the same way that the broadcast company would have. The broadcast company is making their money by selling advertising against the viewers. If you can just do that yourself because you have the demographics data and you have all of the infrastructure, that seemed like a really good idea for Riot to move towards the future. And now they've scrapped the project. So this leaves me with one big question for this entire thing, which is that if at the beginning of 2023, John Needham was publicly talking about the future of sport at Riot Games being tied inextricably, I would argue, to this platform, Riot's esports network. If he saw the future of it, of the future of monetization being tied to their ability to sell specific adverts to their viewers and sell digital goods to their viewers, what does it look like now? How do they monetize now? What does the long-term roadmap look like now for esports? If you can't sell broadcast rights and you can't also build a platform like this that's going to effectively sell direct to viewers, what the hell are we doing here? How are we making any money?